So this is the parasol mushroom. This species called Macrolepiota procera, it's one of the mushrooms that I commonly collect, and I really appreciate this mushroom just because of its amazing look, but also because of its great flavor. You can take this mushroom, you can cut it into pieces, and then you can saute that with butter, with garlic, with a little bit of pepper and salt if you really want to feel its flavor. But also you can add some other ingredients in there. Just keep the recipe simple, and then you're going to pull out everything that this wonderful mushroom has to offer you. Make sure when you're going to collect this in the woods that you're going to use a basket. If you're not going to have a basket, and if you're just going to have, let's say, a plastic bag, you can collect this mushroom, but it's going to shrinkle because it's very fragile. And as you see here in this picture on top left, that's a shrinkled mushroom that I placed in a plastic bag. I didn't have a basket at that time, and especially if you're going to add some other kinds of mushrooms in the same bag, then you'll see dirt all over on it, and it's going to be really hard to wash that fruit body. So yeah, a basket, it's desirable to have. Now this is also called snake mushroom, and that's because of the pattern that you see here on its stem that resembles snake skin. Also in the younger fruit bodies, as you see their caps, they have pretty much the same pattern. Once the cap starts to develop and mature, then that pattern, it's kind of losing itself a little bit, but still on the cap of this mushroom you will see more often scales. Now let's enter and see a little bit on the identification of it. Usually forms large caps, medium to large I would say, and when it's young it has this egg-shaped cap that at the margin has its veil, and when that veil is going to break, then it forms these rings on the stem. Those are movable rings, so sometimes you may find this mushroom with the ring down right at the bottom of the stem. As the mushroom mature, then loses some of its scales, and sometimes it may appear rather smooth in a way, kind of a paper texture if it doesn't really have many scales, but in most cases you will see scales. Also, the center of the mushroom usually has this umbo. This is how it's called. It's more like a nip that usually it's dark brown, and the rest of the cap has this interesting color. It's cream, gray, pinkish, whitish. It's a mixed color, I would say, and you see that also the margin has the same color. The gills are crowded and free from the stem, and they are very fragile, so you'll see that they kind of break easily. They're white, cream to pinkish color. Now the stalk is long and it has this bulb right at the base, and it's also hollow inside. I wouldn't say that it's a true hollow stalk because it has portion which doesn't seem to be just hollow, but still it's considered a hollow stalk. And because of its stalk, it's named the snake mushroom. And what else? It has this skin which is very peelable. So sometimes it's scaly, sometimes doesn't really have scales on it. The flesh, it's white pinkish, and it's fairly thick, especially in the middle of the cap, but it's not changing the color up on when you're tearing apart the cap, which is an interesting and a very good character for its identification. Although it's rather fruity, the spore print, it's white, and you may find this mushroom in groups, or sometimes it's solitary by itself, but I would say that it's very common locally. So if you'll go in the forest and you'll find this mushroom, just make sure that you're going to look around, because you might find way more. Sometimes I collected this mushroom, like 2 bags packed with this type of mushroom at a time. So it's very common, and it's a very good protein source. If you know it, then you can even dry it up. You can turn the dry fruit body into a powder, and you can put it in a jar and keep it in the pantry, and that's going to flavor your dishes. You can do that with it. You can find this in both, in conifer woods, in hardwoods, and also in grassy areas on the margin of the roads. So mostly it's going to pop in the summer. Also in the fall you can find it. Even sometimes you don't really need to expect rain that much, but generally you'll find it after the rainy season. I would say that this is a mushroom that may develop even if there's not a lot of moisture in the soil. Now make sure that you're going to identify this mushroom correctly, because it might be confused with the toxic Chlorophyllum molybdentis that I talked about when I showed you the shaggy mane mushroom. Practically the same poisonous mushroom. It's a lookalike of this one. And also it may be confused easily with Macrolepiota rhacodes, which is edible, and it's the cousin of this one here, and Amanita rubescens, which is another edible mushroom belonging to the Amanitaceae family. Also you might confuse this with even the shaggy mane, but in this case you don't have that liquefying or self-digesting process. Now let's look a little bit into the lookalikes. So in the first in the corner right up, we have that same picture of Macrolepiota molybdenus that I told you about. Now in this case we have green spore print. So make sure that if you see a green spore print, then it's going to be this particular one, and it's not going. If you don't see any white spore print, then it's not our parasol mushroom. And also this one here forms sometimes fairy rings, while the parasol mushroom doesn't. And this one also has those green to olive green gills that stain dark when they're handled. Yeah, so this one is toxic. Make sure that you don't confuse it with this one, and grows in the same habitat. The second one is Amanita rubescens. Now this is an edible mushroom. Looks pretty much like our parasol mushroom, but in this case the cap, it's white and then tan brownish dull red, and sometimes you may see, most times I would say, that the cap it's tapped with words. So those scales are more like words. It's not really scales, thin and long. In this case you have words, but sometimes you don't really see words on it, or you might see very few. The stalk in this case has a skirt-like ring, and when you handle the fruit body, stains dull red, and you will notice that immediately when you take one of these in your hands. And also this one has a bulb at the base of the stalk, as you may see here in this picture. Now the spores, or the spore print, it's white in this case. So yeah, there are some differences. Even if something happens and just by mistake you confuse it with something like this, then make sure that you're not going to eat that raw, because this is known to be edible. Personally, I never ate Amanita rubescens, but it's said to be toxic when eaten raw. Now another mushroom that you can very easily mistake the parasol mushroom with is the Macrolepiota rhacodes. Now in this case we have a white colored cap, which is quite large. Looks pretty much like the parasol mushroom cap. If you're thinking about scales, just the difference in this one is that the scales are bigger, and sometimes the center of the cap it's really brown. And also this one has a bulbous stalk, and it doesn't have that pattern, the snake pattern, and it has a ring, but also stains orange at first and then red. So these are very important characteristics. The spore print, it's white, and you can find it pretty much in the same habitat, but this is an edible one. So this is how the mushroom looks in its habitat. This is a recording of it's a compilation of several times when I've been in the woods, and then I wanted to show you by this different ways on how different pictures, let's say, on how this mushroom looks like. I'm talking about different specimens, and in this case you can see the gills that are crowded, are free from the stalk, and you also saw the color. And this is the ring, which is movable. Sometimes you can find it at the bed of stock that it's fallen, especially in drier specimens. And also here you can see that the upper part of the stalk, it doesn't have that snake skin, but this is not necessarily a rule. Most likely you're not going to see the snake skin on the upper part of the stem, but from the ring downwards. Here you may see the parasol mushroom in its young state. You notice that the cap has a dark color. It has a bunch of scales also, and here you have a mature sample. Even though that this is mature, notice and observe the different color, which is a little bit darker than in the first sample that I showed you. And also you may see that this mature mushroom, probably if I'm not going to pick it, it's not going to resist for a very long time. It's going to dry up, and even the ring, sometimes when you just touch it, just falls down. So this is Amanita rubscher, has very few words on the cap. This is the color of the cap. It's a brownish, dull, reddish cap in this case, with some grayish tinges. Also you may see the skirt like ring, so it's a different ring type, and it doesn't have that snake skin pattern on the stalk, but it has that bulb. So the bulb is present in this one too. And also this one has crowded gills, free from the stalk, and when you touch it, has this reddish color all over on it. I can't really show you in this case because this is a drier specimen. Depends very much on the climate also.